In this tutorial, I'm going to cover how to do a basic black and white conversion using Adobe Lightroom Classic. There are more advanced techniques beyond what I'm going to show in this tutorial using dodge and burn that we will cover later, but for now, very basic black and white conversion. So get an image together that you want to follow along with. I am in the develop module. Before we get started, before I like to convert something to black and white, I like to make a virtual copy of the original image. A virtual copy takes up no additional space. You can have an unlimited amount of them. And it keeps the original intact and allows you to experiment on a copy. So I'm going to use this picture of Lucas behind the scenes photo from a 48-hour film festival competition we did last year. I'm going to right click on that. And right here in the middle somewhere, you can see create virtual copy. So anytime before you do a black and white conversion, I would suggest getting in the habit, create a virtual copy. Now, typically we might come over here into the basics panel and start adjusting our tonal range. However, I like to do it after the conversion, but I do like to do a couple things first. One, I'm going to take my white balance picker, and I do like to adjust the white balance. So typically teeth or eyes are really good. In this one, I know that this color is neutral, right? You can see it's all about 70. So I'm going to pick kind of a 70, 70, 70, something neutral in there, something like that. It's going to warm up my image a little bit. I can also see that it's slightly crooked, so I'm going to take my crop tool and the little ruler right here, the straighten tool, and I'm going to draw right along this black line that I have there. I'm going to straighten that out, a little bit of a nudge. I'm also going to crop a little bit. I'm going to make sure that this is locked so it stays proportional, and I'm going to click on original. What I would suggest is when you crop, choose one of these. These are standard print sizes, something that we could print and find a frame for pretty easily. So 1x1, that's a square. You see that on original Instagram. Traditional portraits are 8x10. You don't see a lot of photographs with this 8.5x11, but 5x7, 1x1, 8x10, 2x3, these are pretty common. I'm going to go with a 5x7. And I like how it cropped it right there, right? I could even come in a little bit, just a little bit. And then I'm going to drag it up so I don't cut off the head, maybe a little bit more. And since that's locked, it's going to stay proportional. I don't want to headhunt, so I want to give him a little headroom there. And I'm going to center the face about in there. I'm going to hit return. And now I fill the frame a little bit more. Next up, right here under treatment in the basic panel, we have black and white. Either hit the V on the keyboard, which is the shortcut, or click on black and white to do a simple conversion. Before we move along, I want you to come over to the left, and you will have a history panel. And the last thing we did here is everything we've done, right? And then the most recent thing should be on top, convert to black and white. I want you to right click and crop history step settings to before, or copy history step settings to before. I'm going to hit that. What does that mean? That's a fancy way of saying that if I were now to check the before and after, instead of it being the color image, it would be this step where we made it black and white. That will allow our comparisons later to be easier. All right. Now, I'm looking at my histogram up here. I have a good tonal range, all right? However, black and white, very common is that I like to push the exposure down, all right? I like to darken the image a little bit. So on this particular one, and it's all seasoned to taste, every image is different, I'm going to go around about a little over a stop. Contrast. What exactly is contrast? If we move this all the way to the left, that means that the white and black points are really close to each other, and you're going to kind of have a flat, neutral gray, black and white. If I push this all the way to the right, the black and the white points are separate from each other. They're farthest away from each other, but you get too much contrast with that. However, somewhere in the plus range usually works really well for black and white, okay? So in this particular one, maybe somewhere around plus 35. Now with that, I might have lost a little bit of detail by pulling the exposure down, pushing the contrast. I might have lost a little bit in here. So I'm going to push my highlights out a little bit, right? Just to bring back a little bit of that detail in the dark areas. In my shadows, right? This is kind of seasoned to taste. You can darken or you can bring out details. Kind of depends on what mood you're trying to create. I kind of like how that was darkened down there, so I'm actually going to push mine this way. Again, every image is different. What you want is different, but I kind of like darkening that up a little bit down there. I'm not going to touch white and blacks. I'm going to jump down to clarity. Now, clarity adds contrast kind of to the midtones, all right? You don't want to use this too heavily on a colored image. It makes it look really fake HDR. But with black and white, you could push it pretty good. So very similar to contrast above. I'm going to push this out. And I'm going to push, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, somewhere around there. More than I ever would on a color photo probably. So I'm going to push that out. Right now I'm going to hit Y to do a comparison. You could see what we have so far. This was the original. Right, kind of blown out here. Not a lot of separation between the whites and blacks. And then now you can see it getting a little darker and creating a little more contrast. So Y to close that. Now, I'm going to come back to the tone curve in a minute. Let's look at the black and white slider. And first, actually, you know what I haven't done? Lens correction. So I'm going to turn that on. That's going to brighten my image and also get rid of a little bit of distortion. And black and white. What is this little black and white mix? Well, you're not going to see it on your color photos. It's going to say HSL, but as soon as we converted this to black and white, it gave us a black and white mix. What these are all the colors that make up the color range in an original image. If you knew what colors were red, you can darken them by pushing it to the right. Anything that was red would be darker. To the left, anything would be darker. To the right, brighter. And it would do that for every color. You might want to click auto to get started. I usually try auto to get started. It gives me kind of a good base setting, right? However, it lowered my orange and yellow. And a little tip I learned not too long ago was that this can work kind of like a basic touch-up on the skin, right? So if I come in here, right, especially on a female, you want to kind of help them out a little bit. But I like to maybe push these a little bit, but I don't want the face to be too bright. But most skin tones are in the orange and yellow range. So I'm going to push that, and it is going to be kind of a little beauty slider in there. Come back out. What if you don't know what color's associated with what in the picture? Well, you could take this magic tool right here, and I use this a lot, especially on landscape photos, where I can maybe darken the sky and stuff. You can come over to a part of the image, like up here, for example, and I can go down to darken, right? And it's going to move some sliders on the right or left, right? So over here, it's going to find whatever color those were and move them. All right, so I'm going to undo that because I don't want to do that, but I'm just showing you that you can click something and make it darker or brighter that way. Now, tone curve. I like where I'm at. If I hit Y again, I can see a pretty good contrast right here, right? So I'm not going to do my typical S curve on the tone curve here, but I am going to option click right here at the darks to kind of pin a point at the shadows. And here's something you can do. This is optional. Part of the kind of vintage black and white look is that the blacks are matte. They're matted. That means that they're not pure black, they're more kind of gray. How do you do that? And this is purely optional, aesthetic choice. But pay attention to the dark areas here. I'm going to push the black point up, and you're going to see that instead of pure black, that's going to be kind of a gray, faded look. If I wanted to, I can kind of push that a little darker. I am going to maybe bring that down a little. Said I wasn't going to do much, but I might bring that a little bit. I do kind of like having that a little darker. I wasn't going to do a full dodge and burn in here. That is using some of these tools like the graduated filter or the radial brush or the radial filter. But I am going to do one short one because if you look here, this is really bright. It competes with the face. It draws your attention here, and I want my attention to be here. So I'm going to take the graduated filter, and I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to click right on the left edge, and I'm going to drag this out a little bit. All right, what is this going to do? Whatever effect that we set here, right? We can adjust all of these settings. It's going to apply it and slowly fade it out. If I turn on this show selected mask overlay, you can kind of see this red. Whatever this is, it's going to start here at like 100% and then slowly fade out. What does that mean? Well, if I push the exposure all the way to the left, you can see that it would be black and it would slowly disappear. And I do want to bring that down, just not that much. I'm trying to match the circle over here. I'm creating kind of a vignette with this. So I'm going to push this exposure, and I'm doing about a little, maybe 2.5 stops. Once I get what I want, I can click done. And there we go. Why? To see the before on the left, after on the right. I can also do the backslash before, and you could see really blown out in here, blown out in here, after, right? And I made this pretty dark and moody. This is a particular mood. You might not want to go this dark. One last little tip, well, a couple little tips to kind of go on with our vintage look. I'm going to click in. Now this already has some grain because it was shot at a high ISO 1600, so it's already grainy. But I'm going to kind of come under effects and to add to that kind of vintage look, in addition to matting the blacks, a lot of people like to add a little grain. All right, so we already have some. It's not going to make a whole lot of difference because there's already some in there. But I'm going to push this maybe around 30, and then I'm going to make the size bigger. All right, I'm going to make it kind of stand out, maybe around, I don't know, 50, something like that. If you hit this little tab on any window or any panel, you can see the before and the after. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out like that. And my last little tip is we converted to black and white, but right below that in this kind of 4-square picker right here, it's called the profile browser. I'm going to open that up, and there's all these kind of pre-built profiles, including black and white. I don't always use these, but watch what happens. There's a bunch of presets. You can do this actually at the start. A lot of people do it at the start. I'm going to do it here at the end, and I'm going to roll over and just see if I like anything and the way it does that. Like, I kind of like that a little bit, right? I can come over, a little too bright, really too bright. I'm going to come in. Ooh, kind of like that. That took away some of my maybe dark tonal ranges, maybe a little flat, but I do like it. Stuff like this, right? Too bright, too dark. You don't want to get too carried away. This one kind of muddy looking, right? I think 3's not bad. 4, right? Too bright, too contrasty. 5's not bad. 7 I kind of like. All right. Stick with 3. Maybe I'll do 10. Just something different. And now we have the amount slider right here. How much of this effect do we want? Do we want less of it? And that's going to darken my image back up, which I am going to do. because I like the little bit of darkness I have. Or you can do more. I'm going to click close. Before, after, simple black and white conversion. Have fun, create the mood and style that you want, create cool artwork.